The power went out at exactly 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and I knew immediately that my week was about to become a living nightmare courtesy of Brenda Patterson and the Meadowbrook Springs HOA board. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, where the summer heat doesn't care about your comfort or your electric bill. When the transformer on our street blew during a monsoon storm, I did what any reasonable person would do. I went to my garage, wheeled out my Honda EU 7000IS generator that I'd bought specifically for emergencies like this, and got my house running again. The generator was quiet, EPA compliant, and positioned as far from neighboring houses as possible on my own property. I made sure to check all the local ordinances before firing it up. Everything was legal, everything was safe, and most importantly, my insulin stayed cold in the refrigerator. I'm Andrew Morrison, a software engineer who works from home, and I'm diabetic. That last detail matters because without power, my medication goes bad, and I end up in the emergency room. Simple as that. The generator wasn't a luxury. It was medical necessity. By sunrise, I had been running the generator for about 3 hours when I heard the knock on my door. Not a friendly neighbor checking if I needed anything. Not the power company giving me an update. It was Brenda Patterson, the HOA president, standing on my porch with her phone already out, recording. "Mr. Morrison," she said, not even bothering with a greeting. "I'm documenting a violation of the community noise ordinance. Your generator has been running since before dawn." I rubbed my eyes, still groggy. "The power's out, Brenda. I'm keeping my medication refrigerated." The community bylaws clearly state that generators can only be run for a maximum of 4 hours within any 24-hour period, she said, scrolling through her phone with her free hand. "You're in violation." "That's insane," I said. "The power company said it could be days before they restore service. The whole transformer needs replacing." "Rules are rules, Mr. Morrison. I'm giving you a courtesy warning now, but if this continues, there will be fines." She smiled that tight-lipped smile that I'd come to despise over the past 2 years of living in this community. We can't have one resident disturbing the peace just because they feel their situation is special. My situation is special. It's medical. Check the ADA if you want. The Americans with Disabilities Act doesn't override community covenants that you signed when you purchased your home. She tapped her phone screen. "I'm sending you the relevant section now. Have a good day." She walked away before I could respond, her sensible heels clicking on my driveway. I stood there, generator humming behind me in the backyard, wondering how someone could be so deliberately obtuse about basic human needs. The power company's automated system confirmed what I feared. Complete outage for at least 4 to 6 days, while they worked on replacing the transformer and repairing storm damage to the lines. 6 days without power in Scottsdale in August meant temperatures inside the house reaching 110 degrees or more. It meant spoiled food, no air conditioning, and most critically for me, no way to keep my insulin at the proper temperature. I called my lawyer, Patricia Henderson, who I'd kept on retainer specifically because of HOA disputes. She'd helped me fight a previous battle over my solar panels that Brenda had deemed aesthetically inconsistent with the neighborhood character. "They can't actually enforce that," Patricia said after I explained the situation. "Arizona law specifically allows for generator use during power outages, especially for medical needs. The HOA covenant can't supersede state law or federal disability protections. So I just keep running it, document everything. Keep your medical records handy, take photos with timestamps, save all communications from the HOA. If they fine you, we'll fight it. But Andrew, fair warning, this is going to get ugly before it gets better. She wasn't wrong. By that evening, I had an official violation notice taped to my front door. $500 fine for extended unauthorized generator operation, creating noise pollution and disturbing the peace. The notice stated I had 24 hours to cease operation or face additional daily fines of $500. I took photos of everything, then called Patricia again. She drafted a response citing my medical needs, state law, and federal protections. I submitted it through the HOA portal and kept my generator running. The next morning, Brenda was back, this time with 2 other board members. Dennis Clark and Margaret Walsh, both retired and apparently with nothing better to do than harass people trying to keep their insulin from spoiling. "Mr. Morrison, you were given explicit instructions," Brenda said, again recording on her phone. "Your generator is still running." "And my insulin is still good," I replied. "I submitted my legal response last night. I'm not paying the fine and I'm not turning off my generator until the power comes back on." Dennis stepped forward, a tall man with silver hair and the bearing of someone who thought his retirement from a middle management position made him important. "Young man, you don't seem to understand how communities work. We have rules for the benefit of everyone. Your neighbors are suffering through this outage without making it everyone else's problem. My neighbors don't have a medical condition that requires refrigeration," I said. "And honestly, if any of them had asked, I'd have happily run extension cords to help them out too." "That's another violation," Margaret chimed in, consulting her own phone. "Community utilities sharing between properties, that's $300. I couldn't help but laugh. I said if they asked, I haven't actually done it. You can't fine me for hypothetical violations." "The fine stands for the generator," Brenda said, "and it's now $1,000 as of this morning. Another $500 for refusing to comply within the grace period. You have until 5 p.m. today." They left, and I went back inside, checking my blood sugar levels and taking a dose of insulin from the refrigerator that my generator was keeping cold. The medication was holding at a perfect 42 degrees. Everything was working exactly as it should. By afternoon, I'd had enough of being defensive. I started making calls to my neighbors, the ones I actually knew and talked to regularly. Tom and Sarah Chen next door, retired couple, had been struggling. Their food had all spoiled. The Johnsons across the street had 3 kids under 10, and the house was becoming unbearable in the heat. The Rodriguez family 2 doors down had an elderly grandmother living with them who needed her oxygen concentrator. "Why didn't you guys say something?" I asked Tom when I stopped by with some extension cords. "Brenda told everyone you were running the generator illegally, and that anyone who accepted power from you would be fined too," he said. "She sent out a community-wide email yesterday." That evening, I hooked up extension cords to 3 houses. Not enough to run their whole systems, but enough for refrigerators, some fans, and medical equipment. I documented everything with photos and kept every receipt. If they wanted to fine me, I'd make sure there was a clear record of why I was doing what I was doing. The email from the HOA came at 7 p.m. $2,000 in new fines for unauthorized power distribution and creating electrical hazards in common areas because the extension cords crossed the sidewalk. They had added a demand for immediate cessation of all generator operation and removal of all extension cords by 8 a.m. the following morning, or face legal action, including potential liens against the property. Patricia called me after I forwarded her the email. "This is actually good for us. They're overplaying their hand. But Andrew, you need to be prepared for them to take this to court. They might try for an emergency injunction." Let them try. I've got everything documented, including the email from Brenda telling people not to accept help from me. Forward that to me immediately. That's potential evidence of intentional infliction of emotional distress and possibly discrimination based on your disability. The next morning, I had a different visitor. Harold Preston, the property manager that the HOA contracted for maintenance and enforcement. He was a reasonable guy, mid-50s, who'd always struck me as someone who understood that not everything needed to be a battle. "Andrew," he said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "I'm being told to submit paperwork for a lien on your property. The board is claiming $5,000 in fines now." $5,000? For what? Does it matter? He shrugged. "They're making up line items at this point. Look, off the record, I think they're being insane. I told them about your medical situation. I told them about the state laws. Brenda doesn't care. She sees this as a challenge to her authority. So what happens now? I have to file the paperwork. It's my job, but it'll take time to process and you'll have opportunity to contest it. My advice: keep doing what you're doing. Keep documenting everything, and when this goes in front of a judge, you're going to win. But it's going to cost you in lawyer fees and it's going to be stressful. Thanks for the heads up, Harold." "One more thing," he said, lowering his voice even though we were alone on my porch. "The power company told me this morning they might have service restored sooner than expected. Maybe by tomorrow night or Friday morning. If you can just hold out a bit longer, this whole thing might become moot." That was good news, at least. I could handle another day or two of fighting with the HOA if it meant keeping my medication safe and helping my neighbors. But things got worse before they got better. That afternoon, Scottsdale police showed up at my door. Officer Martinez and Officer Kelly, both looking uncomfortable. "Sir, we received a complaint about illegal generator operation and electrical hazards," Officer Martinez said. "Can you show us your setup?" I walked them around to my backyard and explained everything. The generator, positioned on my property, properly grounded, running a properly rated transfer switch that I'd had installed by a licensed electrician 2 years ago when I bought the generator. The extension cords were all outdoor rated, properly secured, and running to help neighbors with medical needs. Officer Kelly checked some things on her phone. "Who filed the complaint?" HOA president, I'd guess. Brenda Patterson. The officers exchanged a look. Officer Martinez sighed. "We're familiar with Miss Patterson. She calls us about twice a month for various violations in the neighborhood. Sir, from what I can see here, you're not doing anything illegal. The generator is on your property. It's a reasonable noise level, and Arizona statute specifically allows for generator operation during power outages. The extension cord situation is a bit unusual, but you're helping people, not creating a hazard. So I'm good. As far as the police are concerned, yes. We'll file a report saying we found no violations or safety hazards. But I can't tell you what to do about your HOA. That's a civil matter." After they left, I felt vindicated but also exhausted. It had only been 3 days since the power went out, and I'd been dealing with constant harassment, mounting fines, and now police calls. All because I wanted to keep my insulin cold and help my neighbors. That evening, my phone rang. It was Dennis Clark from the HOA board. "Mr. Morrison, the board has decided to offer you a compromise," he said in what I'm sure he thought was a magnanimous tone. "If you shut down the generator immediately, we'll reduce your fines to $1,000 and not pursue the lien. This is a one-time offer." "No," I said simply. "Excuse me. No. I'm not paying any fines. I'm not shutting down my generator, and I'm not being blackmailed into compliance by a board that doesn't understand basic property law or human decency. If you want to pursue this, See me in court. You're making a big mistake, Mr. Morrison. The board has significant resources, and I hung up. Let him talk to the dial tone. Patricia called me later that evening with news. They filed for an emergency hearing. It's scheduled for Friday afternoon. Judge Morrison, no relation to you I assume, will hear arguments about the fines and whether they can compel you to stop running the generator. Will the power even still be out by Friday? According to the utility company's latest update, probably not. They're saying Thursday night or Friday morning most likely. But we should still prepare for the hearing. Even if the immediate issue is resolved, there's the matter of the fines and establishing precedent, so they can't do this to you or anyone else in the future. Thursday morning arrived and my generator was still humming along. I'd been running it for nearly 6 days straight, refueling it twice a day, monitoring everything carefully. My insulin was fine. My neighbors were grateful, and the HOA was losing their collective minds. Brenda showed up one more time, this time with what looked like a professional photographer. Documenting evidence for the hearing tomorrow, she announced, not even pretending to be civil anymore. I hope you've enjoyed your little rebellion, Mr. Morrison, because after tomorrow, you're going to learn what happens when you ignore the rules everyone else manages to follow. Everyone else doesn't have diabetes, Brenda, but you know what? You're right about one thing. Tomorrow is going to be educational, just maybe not the way you think. She had the photographer take shots from every angle, including some from the sidewalk that made the extension cords look more prominent than they actually were. I took my own photos from the same angles for comparison. Then, around 2 p.m. on Thursday afternoon, something interesting happened. The power came back on, not to my house specifically, but to the whole neighborhood except for my street. The repair crews had energized one section of the grid, and apparently my street was scheduled to be last. I watched as lights came on in houses behind mine, heard air conditioners kicking in throughout the neighborhood. But my street, the 6 houses that had been directly affected by the transformer failure, remained dark. Tom Chen came over around 4 p.m. Did you see? Everyone else has power. They're saying our street might be another full day because of some technical issue with the transformer replacement. Of course it is, I said. I had a suspicion forming in my mind and I didn't like it. I called the power company directly, getting transferred 3 times before reaching someone who could give me actual information. Yes, Mr. Morrison, your street is scheduled for energization tomorrow morning, approximately 10 a.m., the technician said. There was a priority request submitted by the HOA management company to restore power to the rest of the development first. That's convenient, I muttered, and completely coincidental that my street is last, I'm sure. Sir, I just follow the work orders. So that was their play. They'd leaned on the power company somehow to restore power to everyone else first, making it look like my street's continued outage was my fault, or somehow less important. It was petty and vindictive, and exactly what I'd come to expect from Brenda and her board. That evening, I made a decision. If they wanted to play games, I could play games too. I had been keeping my generator running to help everyone on my street. But now I was tired, I was angry, and I wanted to make a point. I went to each house I'd been helping with extension cords and explained the situation. The power company is restoring service tomorrow morning. I'm going to shut down my generator tonight at midnight because I need to do some maintenance on it before tomorrow's court hearing. The Chens understood. The Rodriguez family was disappointed but grateful for the help. The Johnsons asked if there was any way I could keep it running just a bit longer for their kids, but I explained I needed to change the oil and check some things before the hearing. What I didn't do was tell anyone else in the neighborhood. especially not Brenda Patterson, who had just gotten her power back and was presumably enjoying her air conditioning while my street continued to swelter. At midnight, I shut down the generator. The sudden silence was eerie after nearly a week of constant humming. I went inside my now powerless house, made sure my insulin was moved to a cooler with ice packs, and went to sleep in the heat. Friday morning arrived hot and miserable. By 8 a.m., my house was already approaching 90 degrees inside. But I knew power would be restored in a couple hours, and I could endure anything for a couple hours. At 9:30 a.m., my phone started ringing. Tom Chen, Sarah Chen, Maria Rodriguez, all asking if something was wrong with my generator, if I needed help getting it running again. I explained I'd shut it down for maintenance and that the power company had promised restoration by 10 a.m. 10 o'clock came and went. No power. I called the utility company and got a recorded message about unexpected delays. Estimated restoration now pushed to 2 p.m. Noon arrived. Still no power. The house was over 100 degrees inside. I was sitting in my car with the AC running, monitoring my insulin temperature in the cooler. My phone rang. It was Harold Preston, the property manager. "Andrew, I don't know how to tell you this, but the power company is saying they can't restore service to your street until tomorrow now. Something about needing a part they don't have in stock." "Harold, that's convenient timing for a court hearing that's in 3 hours." I thought the same thing. Look, I'm not saying Brenda did anything directly, but her brother-in-law works for the regional utility management. I'm just saying the timing is suspicious. After I hung up with Harold, I sat in my car and thought about my options. I could fire up the generator again. It would be the responsible thing to do. My neighbors were counting on me, and they'd done nothing wrong. But I was done being responsible while Brenda and the board played dirty. If they wanted to manipulate the power company to make me look bad in court, fine. Two could play that game. I drafted an email to everyone on my street explaining the situation. Generator was down for maintenance. Power company kept pushing the timeline, and I had to be in court all afternoon, so I couldn't get the generator running again until evening at the earliest. I was very sorry. I hoped everyone had made other arrangements and I'd have things running again as soon as possible. Then I sent a separate email to the HOA board, copying all board members and Harold Preston. In it, I detailed every interaction, every fine, every threat. I included the information about Brenda's brother-in-law working for the utility company, and the suspicious timing of the continued outage on my street, specifically. I noted that my generator, which had been running reliably for a week, was now down for necessary maintenance, and I would not be able to provide assistance to my street until after the court hearing and after proper maintenance was completed. I didn't say I was deliberately keeping the generator off. I just made it clear that I was too busy dealing with their legal harassment to be able to help anyone right now. The hearing was scheduled for 3 p.m. at the Maricopa County Justice Court. Patricia met me there at 2:30 to go over our strategy. "They're going to argue that you violated the covenants repeatedly and flagrantly, that you created safety hazards, and that you ignored multiple warnings," she said. "We're going to argue medical necessity, state law preemption, and federal ADA protections. We're also going to introduce the email from Brenda telling people not to accept help from you as evidence of discrimination." "What about the suspicious timing with the power company?" "Unless you have direct evidence of wrongdoing, I'd avoid it. It sounds conspiracy theory and we don't need it. We have a strong case without it." The courtroom was small, and Judge Alice Morrison presided with the efficient air of someone who had seen every HOA dispute imaginable. Brenda sat with the board's lawyer. a slick-looking guy named Robert Chen, who probably charged $400 an hour to argue about whether lawns were cut to regulation height. The HOA presented their case first. Robert Chen laid out a timeline of violations, displayed photos of my generator and the extension cords, and painted a picture of me as a scofflaw who thought the rules didn't apply to him. Your Honor, Mr. Morrison was given multiple opportunities to comply with the community covenants he voluntarily agreed to when he purchased his property, Chen said. Instead, he chose to flaunt those rules, rack up thousands in fines, and create safety hazards by running unauthorized electrical connections through common areas. The HOA is simply asking for enforcement of rules that exist for everyone's benefit. When it was our turn, Patricia systematically dismantled their arguments. She presented my medical records showing my diabetes diagnosis and insulin requirements. She cited Arizona state law explicitly allowing generator operation during emergencies. She brought up federal ADA protections that supersede HOA covenants. And then she dropped the bomb. Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibit G, an email from HOA President Brenda Patterson to all community members, sent the day after Mr. Morrison began running his generator. Patricia pulled it up on the courtroom screen. In this email, Ms. Patterson explicitly instructs residents not to accept assistance from Mr. Morrison and threatens them with fines if they do. This is not an HOA trying to enforce reasonable rules. This is targeted harassment of a disabled resident trying to maintain his health and help his neighbors during an emergency. Judge Morrison read the email, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. Miss Patterson, did you send this email? Brenda stood, smoothing her blazer. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Morrison was operating his generator illegally. I didn't want other residents to become complicit in his violations. The generator operation was not illegal under state law, the judge said. And threatening residents with fines for accepting help during a power outage seems unreasonably punitive. Mr. Chen, does your client understand that HOA covenants cannot supersede state or federal law? Robert Chen shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, the covenants are designed to maintain community standards. Mr. Morrison could have made alternative arrangements for his medication. Such as, the judge asked, going to a hotel for a week, imposing on friends or family. Why should he have to leave his home when he had a legal means to address the emergency? The noise impact on neighbors, Your Honor. Patricia jumped in. We have statements from 6 immediate neighbors, all of whom said the generator noise was minimal, and they appreciated Mr. Morrison's help. The only complaints came from Miss Patterson, whose property is 4 houses away from Mr. Morrison's. The hearing continued for another hour, but I could tell which way it was going. Judge Morrison was not impressed with the HOA's arguments, especially after Patricia presented evidence of similar cases where Arizona courts had ruled in favor of homeowners with medical needs. Finally, the judge rendered her decision. I'm ruling in favor of Mr. Morrison on all counts. The HOA covenants, as applied in this case, conflict with both state law allowing emergency generator use and federal ADA protections for individuals with disabilities managing medical conditions. All fines are vacated. Additionally, I'm ordering the HOA to reimburse Mr. Morrison for his legal fees and to revise their community covenants to explicitly allow for generator use during power outages, particularly for medical needs. Brenda's face went red. Your Honor, this sets a dangerous precedent. If one person can ignore the rules, then, Miss Patterson, this case is closed. However, I am concerned about the email you sent threatening other residents. I'm ordering the HOA board to undergo mediation training on disability accommodation and community emergency response. If Mr. Morrison or his attorney brings any evidence of retaliation or continued harassment related to this matter, I will not hesitate to impose sanctions. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Your Honor, Brenda said through gritted teeth. Outside the courthouse, Patricia was pleased with the outcome. That went better than expected. The fee reimbursement alone will probably be $4,000 or $5,000, and the revision to the covenants will help everyone in the community. Thanks for everything, Patricia. Send me your final bill. Will do. Oh, and Andrew, be careful for the next few weeks. Brenda Patterson doesn't strike me as someone who takes losing well. She was right about that. When I got home around 6 p.m., my street still had no power. The sun was setting, and the temperature was finally dropping from the day's high of 108 degrees, but houses were still hot and dark. I pulled my car into the garage and sat there for a moment, thinking. The generator was in the back, fueled and ready to go. I could have it running in 5 minutes. My neighbors needed help. But I was exhausted from a week of fighting, from the stress of the hearing, from the constant battle with people who saw rules as more important than human welfare. I decided to wait. Just a little longer, around 7 p.m., Tom Chen knocked on my door. "Hey Andrew, heard you won in court. Congratulations. Any chance you can get the generator running again? It's getting pretty rough over here." "Soon," I said. "I need to do some maintenance first. The oil needs changing and I want to check the spark plugs. Give me another hour or so." He nodded, looking tired and hot. "No problem. We appreciate everything you've done." At 7:30 p.m. my phone buzzed. An email from Brenda Patterson. Subject line: Community Standards Reminder. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. The email was a masterpiece of passive aggression. It congratulated the community on weathering the extended power outage with grace and cooperation, and reminded everyone that, while courts may rule on technical legal matters, the spirit of community standards and being considerate neighbors remains paramount. It didn't mention me by name, but the target was obvious. At 8 p.m., power was finally restored to my street. I was sitting in my living room in the dark when the lights flickered on, the air conditioning kicked in, and the refrigerator started humming. The sudden normalcy was almost jarring after a week of generator noise and heat. I checked my phone. Multiple texts from neighbors thanking me, asking if I needed the generator running anymore, expressing relief that the power was back. I responded to each one, keeping it simple and friendly. Then I got a text from Harold Preston. "Power back on your street. Good. FYI, I'm resigning as property manager for Meadowbrook Springs HOA, effective immediately. Working for Brenda Patterson isn't worth the stress. Good luck, Andrew." That was interesting. Harold had seemed like the only reasonable person in the HOA infrastructure, and now he was bailing. I wondered what that would mean for future disputes. The weekend was quiet. I caught up on work, enjoyed my air conditioning, and tried to pretend the previous week hadn't happened. But on Monday morning, things got interesting again. I was on a video call with a client when I saw police cars pull up in front of Brenda Patterson's house, 3 doors down and across the street. Not one car, but 3, plus an unmarked sedan that screamed detective vehicle. Officers went to her door, had a conversation I couldn't hear, and then Brenda was walking out with them. Not in handcuffs, but definitely not voluntarily. After my call ended, I texted Tom Chen. "What's going on at Brenda's house?" His response came 5 minutes later. "Holy crap, have you not heard? She got arrested for bribing a utility company employee. Something about paying her brother-in-law to delay power restoration to our street." I stared at my phone. The suspicion I'd had, the conspiracy theory I'd dismissed, had actually been true. Brenda had been so committed to making me look bad in court that she'd actually paid someone to keep my street without power longer than necessary. That evening, the story was all over the local news. HOA president arrested for bribery in utility tampering case. The details were even worse than I'd imagined. Brenda's brother-in-law, Carl Patterson, worked as a scheduling coordinator for the regional utility. She'd paid him $2,000 to prioritize restoration to the rest of Meadowbrook Springs while keeping my specific street offline longer than necessary. What made it criminal was that Carl had lied to his supervisors about equipment availability and technical issues to justify the delay. The utility company had lost money on the overtime required to eventually fix the problem, and several residents on my street had filed complaints about the suspicious delay. When investigators looked into it, they found text messages between Brenda and Carl explicitly discussing the plan. Patricia called me Tuesday morning. "Are you watching the news? I saw it yesterday. This is insane. It's also very good for you. The HOA is going to be dealing with this scandal for months. Brenda will almost certainly be removed from the board, possibly face jail time depending on how the charges shake out. And more importantly, no one is going to be hassling you about generators or anything else anytime soon." She was right. The community Facebook page, which I mostly ignored, exploded with drama. Some people defending Brenda, claiming she was being railroaded. Most people horrified that the HOA president had committed a crime just to win a petty dispute. Several calling for the entire board to resign. A special election was scheduled for the following month to replace Brenda and potentially other board members who'd supported her actions. Dennis Clark and Margaret Walsh both announced they wouldn't seek re-election. The whole leadership structure was collapsing. I stayed out of it, mostly. I posted one message on the community page, thanking everyone who'd supported me during the power outage and expressing hope that the community could move forward with leadership that prioritized residents' well-being over rigid rule enforcement. It got 127 likes and dozens of supportive comments. By Wednesday, the legal proceedings against Brenda were moving forward. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office charged her with bribery of a public employee and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Carl Patterson was charged as well. Both were released on bond but facing potential prison time. The utility company issued a formal apology to all residents on my street and credited our accounts $200 each for the unnecessary delay in restoration. They also announced policy changes to prevent similar abuses in the future. On Thursday, I received a formal letter from the HOA's interim board, now led by a woman named Susan Martinez, who'd been the treasurer. The letter apologized for the previous board's actions, confirmed that all fines against me were vacated, and enclosed a check for $4,837, representing my legal fees plus damages. It also included a draft of revised community covenants, explicitly allowing generator use during emergencies and prohibiting retaliation against residents exercising their legal rights. I showed the letter to Patricia, who reviewed the covenant changes and declared them acceptable. "This is actually better than what the judge ordered. They're covering their asses legally, but the end result is good for everyone." The community slowly returned to normal over the following weeks. Brenda's trial was scheduled for October. Carl had already pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation. The gossip mill churned constantly, but I tried to stay above it. The new HOA board reached out to me in early September, asking if I'd be willing to serve on an emergency preparedness committee. They wanted to develop community-wide plans for future power outages, including potentially installing a backup generator for the community center that could provide relief cooling and device charging for residents during extended outages. I agreed, figuring it was better to be part of the solution than to fight future battles. The committee included Tom Chen, Maria Rodriguez, and 4 other residents. We met twice a month and actually accomplished useful things, like mapping out which residents had medical needs requiring power, creating a phone tree for emergencies, and developing guidelines for neighbor-to-neighbor assistance during crises. In October, Brenda Patterson pleaded no contest to reduce charges. She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution to the utility company and to me personally for emotional distress. The judge's comments during sentencing were scathing. "Miss Patterson, you abused a position of trust within your community to pursue a vendetta against a disabled resident who was simply trying to maintain his health during an emergency. Your actions endangered not just Mr. Morrison but everyone on his street, including elderly residents and children. This kind of petty tyranny masquerading as community leadership cannot be tolerated." I didn't attend the sentencing. I'd moved on. But Patricia sent me a transcript, and I felt a sense of closure reading it. The HOA elections in November brought in a slate of new board members who actually seemed interested in community building rather than rule enforcement. Susan Martinez was elected president. Tom Chen joined the board as well. The whole culture shifted from punitive to collaborative. In December, we had another power outage, this one lasting only 6 hours due to a car hitting a utility pole. I ran my generator without any complaints. 3 neighbors asked if I could help them out with extension cords, which I did. The new board sent out an email thanking residents who'd helped each other during the outage and reminding everyone about the resources available at the community center. It was a small thing, but it represented how much had changed. Instead of threats and fines, we had appreciation and cooperation. Instead of rigid adherence to rules regardless of circumstances, we had flexibility and common sense. By Christmas, the whole saga felt like a distant memory. I was healthy. My insulin was always properly stored, and I lived in a community that had learned an expensive lesson about the difference between rules and justice. Looking back, I don't regret my decision to let the neighborhood sit in darkness that final day while I was in court. It wasn't my responsibility to be everyone's backup generator, especially while I was fighting legal battles caused by their elected leadership. The fact that Brenda had actually criminally manipulated the situation vindicated my suspicions and my frustration. The whole experience taught me several things. First, that HOAs are only as good as the people running them, and petty tyrants can make everyone miserable if left unchecked. Second, that standing up for your rights, even when it's exhausting and expensive, matters not just for you but for everyone else in the community. Third, that documentation is everything in disputes. Every email, every photo, every time-stamped record became crucial evidence. Most importantly, I learned that communities are built on mutual support and respect, not on rigid enforcement of arbitrary rules. The old board saw themselves as enforcers, punishing deviation from their vision of how the neighborhood should function. The new board saw themselves as facilitators, helping residents work together for everyone's benefit. In February, the new board officially named the Emergency Preparedness Initiative the Morrison Emergency Readiness Program, which embarrassed me, but also felt like recognition that the nightmare had led to something positive. We'd installed the community backup generator, created emergency supply stations, and developed protocols that actually made sense. Brenda Patterson served her 6 months and disappeared from the community. I heard she'd moved to Flagstaff after her probation ended. I never saw her again, which was fine by me. Some people never learn that being right about rules matters less than being decent to other humans. My insulin stayed cold. My neighbors stayed safe. And Meadowbrook Springs became a better place to live. All because I refused to let a petty tyrant force me into choosing between my health and her arbitrary rules. The generator sits in my garage now, properly maintained and ready for the next emergency. But these days, when I run it, I know the community has my back instead of fighting against me. That peace of mind is worth more than any HOA fine ever threatened to take away.